All right, kids, you're dismissed to go to your classes. You can take your Bibles and turn to Esther chapter 4. The book of Esther is a most remarkable book. It is a book that is passionate. It is a book of suspense. It is a real book. It is a powerful book. And it is a book that really shows and demonstrates the loving, sovereign hand of God Almighty. And we're going to be in one chapter in this book, but let me give you the context of the book of Esther. In 597 BC, that's been a while ago, the people of Judah, the southern tribes of Israel, because of their continued rebellious nature, have been conquered by the Babylonians. The Babylonians have come in and they have just utterly routed and destroyed Jerusalem, and they have taken most of the people back to Babylon in captivity. That captivity would last 70 years, a long time being away from your home. One of those people that was taken, one of the men that was taken, whose name is Kish. Kish's great-grandson was a man by the name of Mordecai. Mordecai had no children, no wife of his own, but he did take care of his orphaned cousin, whose name was Esther. Esther, for whatever reason, we're not told, lost her parents, and Mordecai, her older cousin, takes care of her. They both lived in the time of Ahasuerus, the king of Persia. Babylonia was taken over by the Persians, and during the time of Mordecai and Esther, they lived under the king Ahasuerus, or maybe you hear the name Xerxes. Maybe that's more familiar to you. Now, Xerxes, during his time, really wanted to go to war with Greece. He wanted to avenge his father's loss to Greece. His father had gone to battle with Greece and had lost and then come back in shame. So he wants to go to battle with them again. And he needs the support of all the tribal leaders of all the empire of Persia. And so what he does is he calls for all these men to come to Shushan, which is the capital of Persia Empire at that time. And he is going to wine and dine them. He is going to gather their support. And this time lasts for a long time. He is really going to throw out all the stops and really show them and demonstrate the elaborate nature of the Persian Empire and really wine and dine them to gather their support. And he throws a big banquet for them. And that's where the book of Esther really begins. And if you begin at chapter 1, it begins at this great banquet. And all these guys, along with the king Xerxes, Ahasuerus, they are partying away. And Ahasuerus decides it's a good idea at this point in time to call for his queen Vashti. And for her to come and just to demonstrate her beauty to all these drunken friends of King Xerxes at this party. And Vashti doesn't think this is a good idea at all, and so she refuses. She says, I'm not doing it. And the king is ticked off about this, and he removes Vashti from her position as queen. He just says, if you're going to be that way, you're no longer queen. Now, Ahasuerus goes off to war with Greece for about 3 years. He comes back and he decides at this time that it'd be a good idea to replace the queen. And so what he does is he sends for all the beautiful and the most beautiful women of all of Persia, all the Persian Empire, to come and to basically show themselves to the king. Esther is one of those young women that is taken. And she finds favor with Xerxes, and Xerxes obviously says, man, this woman's got what a lot of others didn't have. And so she becomes Ahasuerus' wife, the queen in place of Vashti. Now, what she doesn't tell the king is that she's a Jew. It's not popular to be a Jew in the Persian Empire because they're foreigners. And the Jews did not have the kind of, the reputation that elevated them. In fact, they were demeaned quite oftentimes. Now, about this time, Mordecai, her cousin, becomes privy to a plot to assassinate the king. Two guys were gatekeepers for the king, Teresh and Bigthan. Sound like big thugs, don't they? Teresh and Bigthan. Right? And they're going to assassinate the king. Mordecai finds out about it, and they're apprehended and executed, and Mordecai's deeds are recorded in the chronicles for the king. Now, about this same time, Haman, a man named Haman, is promoted to prime minister of all the Persian Empire. And Haman is a man that's filled with pride, and he walks through the gates and he expects everybody to bow down to him. But Mordecai, who now is a gatekeeper at the palace, refuses to bow down to Haman because he knows that Haman is a descendant of the Amalekites. Are you still with me? And the Amalekites were cursed by God. They were cursed by God because when Moses was bringing the people from Egypt into the land of promise, the Amalekites tried to attack Israel from behind, and they killed all the stragglers, the old people, and all the children first, and then went to war with Israel. And their actions so offended God that he cursed the Amalekites. And Mordecai knows that Haman is an Amalekite, so he refuses to bow down. Well, this doesn't go over so well with Haman. Haman gets a little angry about this, and so he devises a plan not only to kill Mordecai, but he's developed a plan to kill all the Jews in all of Persia. And you need to understand that Persia covered most of the entire world at this time, the known world. And so he goes to the king, and the king, for whatever reason, gives his stamp of approval upon this plan. And I can't tell you that there was a more dangerous time to live as a Jew than at this time, during the time of Mordecai and Esther. And Haman, he casts lots to determine when he's going to kill all the Jews, and it lands on the 13th day of the month of Adar. And so they have some time now because he cast lots. And now they've got these Jews they're feeling doomed. What's going to happen? They're facing extinction. What is going to happen? That's where we get to chapter 4 of the book of Esther. So let's find out what happens, all right? That was a quick history lesson. Thank you. I'm a little tired of talking already, but I'm not done. When Mordecai learned all that had happened, he tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes. That was the way they wept back then. That's the way they mourned, and went out into the midst of the city. He cried out with a loud and bitter cry. He went as far as the front of the king's gate, for no one might enter the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. And in every province where the king's command and decree arrived, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. So Esther's maids and eunuchs came and told her, and the queen was deeply distressed. Then she sent garments to clothe Mordecai and to take his sackcloth away from him, but he would not accept them. Then Esther called Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs whom he had appointed to attend to her, and she gave him a command concerning Mordecai to learn what and why this was. So Hathach went out to Mordecai in the city square that was in front of the king's gate, and Mordecai told him all that had happened to him and the sum of money that Haman had promised to pay the king's treasuries to destroy the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the written decree for their destruction, which was given at Shushan, that he might show it to Esther and to explain it to her, that he might command her to go in to the king to make supplication to him and to plead before him for her people. So Hathach returned and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Then Esther spoke to Hathach and gave him a command for Mordecai. And all the king's servants and the people of the king's province know that any man or woman who goes into the inner court to the king who has not been called, he has but one law: put all to death, except the one to whom the king holds out his golden scepter, that he may live. Yet I myself have not been called to go in to the king these 30 days. So they told Mordecai Esther's words, and Mordecai told told them to Esther, "Do not think in your heart," Mordecai says, "that you will escape in the king's palace any more than all the other Jews. For if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, "Go, gather all the Jews who are present in Shushan and fast for me. Neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will fast likewise. And so I will go to the king, which is against the law. And if I perish, I perish." So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther commanded him. Cool stuff, isn't it? And this stuff that Hollywood is made out of, honestly. You read the rest of the book, and you're going to have to if you want the rest of the story, because I'm only going to give you this part. But Esther is faced with some very significant choices in her life because of what has taken place. And there are choices that we are still facing today. And folks, we need to really take stock about these. We've been on this series about a great cloud of witnesses and about how Jesus is worth the risk. And I've been trying to show to you all those throughout history, as many as I can, all those who took a risk for their Lord and why it was worth it. Because we live in a very convenient society and we don't like to do too much outside the norm, and we're okay with Jesus as long as He doesn't ask us to get outside of our comfort zone. And I'm telling you what, Jesus is asking us to get outside our comfort zone. He is asking us to do greater things. He is asking us to do more, and that's where we're living at right now. Man, He's asking us to work while it is yet day. And folks, I don't know how much time we have left. Honestly, I'm going to ask God that I hope it's not too much more. I'd hate to see how evil this world can get. It's evil enough as it is right now. Folks, we've got a job to do, and it's a risky endeavor. And so here we are, and we're going to take a look at Esther and the choices that she was faced with. And I want those choices not only just to be about Esther, but I want them to be about us this morning as well. So let's take a look at them. You got your notes there. You ready? The first choice that Esther makes is between apathy or action. Apathy or action. Edmund Burke is given credit for saying all that is necessary for the triumph of evil is that good men do nothing. That certainly applies to women, too. All that it takes for evil to triumph in this world is that we just sit back on our hands and do nothing. This is what Esther is initially aware of, that she knows that something is going on, but she's not exactly sure why Mordecai is mourning. Remember, she's living in the cocoon of the palace. She's not privy to all the information that Mordecai is privy to. So she sends Hathach, her eunuch, out to Mordecai. And then there's this exchange between Mordecai and Esther, with Hathach as being the mediator. And Mordecai gives to her one of those pivotal speeches, these life-changing speeches, really, as he says to her, he says, "Do not think in your heart that you will escape in the king's palace any more than all the other Jews. For if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this." You see how powerful that is? Mordecai is basically saying to Esther, this is your moment, Esther. This is your hour. You cannot be silent. You must do something. You must take action. Do something. Apathy or action. To sit or to stand. On June 18th, 1940, Winston Churchill gave a speech to his beleaguered nation, who was in the midst now of World War II. And at the House of Commons, he gave this speech to his nation. "Let us brace ourselves to our duties, and so bear ourselves that if the British Empire and its Commonwealth lasts for 1,000 years, men will say this was their finest hour." It reminded me, honestly, of a passage in 1 Corinthians where Paul speaking to the Corinthian men that claimed Christ, be on the alert, stand firm in the faith, act like men, and be strong. Well, I love that. What a great message to men today. Let's stand up and do something. It's been way too long that we've been sitting on our hands and doing nothing. And Paul says, would you start acting like the men that you were created to be? That's powerful, isn't it? It's time to stand up and do something for the Lord. Esther had a choice to make here. She could have stuck her head in the sand and hoped the whole thing just went away. She could have found it simply a lot easier to do nothing. You know, it's always easier to do nothing. It's always easier to do nothing. It's so easy in the moment to think of what somebody else could do instead of you. Plenty of people do that. Chuck Swindoll, I love this quote. As he asks the question, what does it matter if I get involved or not? It matters to your character, he says. Yes, it's true that God has other ways to accomplish His objectives. He has other people that He can use. He isn't frustrated or restrained because you and I may be indifferent. But when that happens, we are the losers. When we have been called for such a time as this, how tragic if we are not there to stand in that hour. There will be no celestial shout urging you to take a stand, nor will a flash of lightning awaken you in the midst of your slumber. It doesn't work like that. So don't sit around waiting passively. Numerous needs and issues surround us. They summon us to stand up and be counted. While we are not be able to respond to all of them, the solution is not to respond to any of them. So let me ask you, what are you doing to stand up, to stand alone, to answer the call of God in this hour? Wow! What am I doing to stand up and to be counted in this hour, on this day, for the cause of the Lord Jesus Christ and His people and the advancement of His kingdom here on this planet? Man, what a penetrating question. You see, this is what Esther is faced with right now. Esther, you have been called at such a time as this, and right now you have the choice either to sit back and do nothing, or you have the opportunity to take some action in the advancement of God's agenda upon this planet. This is not just an Esther thing, you understand? This is us today. God is calling every one of us. He's looking at me and saying, Kevin, what are you doing this week? What are you doing today? How are you going to involve yourself? Are you going to sit back and just watch? Usually, you know what happens to those that sit back and watch? We just criticize everything else everybody else is doing. All right? They should be doing that. Oh, man, I can't believe they're doing that. You know, I would rather you try and get it wrong than not try at all. I'd rather you go out and do something. I'd rather you take fruit out to your neighbors and have the door slammed in your face, 14 times and have people look at you and go, fruit? I don't want fruit. If you had a Snickers bar, now that'd be something. I don't want any fruit. Yeah. I would rather you try and fail than to sit on your hands and say, what a stupid idea this is. All right? You see, we have the choice right now. Apathy or action. Apathy, do nothing. That will always be easier. Do nothing or take action. There's another choice that Esther was facing. Selfishness or selflessness. Selfishness or selflessness. Philippians 2, verses 3 through 4. I'm just going to read this nice and slow because this has got a lot of good stuff in it. Instead of being motivated by selfish ambition, instead of thinking that all this world is here for me, that somehow that, the world revolves around me, each of you should in humility, and that's in parentheses, or in commas there, like it's in parentheses, just to remind us that God resists the proud, but He gives grace to what? The humble. All right? So instead of being motivated by selfish ambition or vanity, each of you should, in humility, be moved to treat one another as more important than yourself. Each of you should be concerned not only about his own interest, but about the interest of others as well. When it's easy.